Hey everybody, and welcome back to another max velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be going over that severe weather potential for tomorrow across portions of the southern plains. We'll also be talking about that winter storm that is ongoing in the Rocky Mountains, and as well as the tropics. We actually have two areas of development right now in the Atlantic Ocean, a couple of important updates with both of them and where they might head next and if they will actually develop into anything significant. Let's begin by discussing the nationwide weather across the United States over the next several days. Beginning with today, we do have a trough back up in New England. This is the one that brought the severe weather to areas in the southern plains and the Dixie Valley. That will continue to move off to the northeast. After today, not a whole lot of impacts are expected to the United States. Heading into tomorrow, a very strong ridge will build into those areas that are seeing rain today. So back up in the Great Lakes region, we'll have a pretty strong ridge back up into the northeast. But another thing to note is going to be this trough back over in Colorado. That's actually bringing a winter storm right now to areas in Colorado, but this will bring a lot of rain heading into tomorrow and Friday across the southern plains. It really starts to strengthen going to late Thursday into Friday, and we'll see some showers and storms, which even some severe weather may occur back down in Texas. Eventually heading into the weekend, this will move into the Dixie Valley, so it might bring at least some rain, if not maybe a chance for severe weather. And then heading into early next week, that will start to kind of clear out, go off to the northeast. Eventually heading into late next week, we may have a strong trough built into areas across the Midwest. Could bring a winter storm, but again, that's a little bit early to kind of talk about that, but we'll be keeping an eye on that. Going to Colorado for the next 24 to 48 hours, a lot of snow is expected across this region. Beginning with today into tomorrow, we'll see some snow showers, potentially some moderate to heavy snow at some times, and eventually heading into Thursday afternoon, most of that clears out. But one thing to note is that we'll see a lot of snow out of this over the next 24 to 36 hours. Some areas seeing upwards of 4 to 8 inches of snow. Areas like Edwards has the best chance for potentially getting upwards of about a half foot, maybe even a little bit more than that. And we do have winter weather advisories in effect for areas just west of Denver to take into account with that potential that we have today in terms of the snow and as well as into tomorrow morning. Now, what's the timing looking like for this trough back down in the southern plains? Well, this trough will really start to ramp up with shower and storm activity heading into late Thursday. Now, there will be a lot of showers and storms, and a lot of these yellow and oranges, you're probably thinking maybe some severe weather, right? Well, there might be. There's definitely a possibility for a little bit of severe weather, but the big issue, just like what we had this past week with the other severe weather event in the central plains, is buoyancy. We don't have dew points that high. The dew points are going to most likely be in the low to mid 50s, so that will not be enough to really create even really just scattered or even numerous severe weather activity. So this will likely be a lot of rain, but maybe a little bit of isolated severe weather, which all modes of severe weather will be possible. It's just going to be on a low scale. Eventually heading to Friday morning to the afternoon, this trough moves off to the east, bringing a lot of rainfall and again, potentially a little bit of isolated severe weather. Severe weather heading into Friday will probably be across southeast Texas, and eventually heading into Saturday, this will eventually move off towards areas like Mississippi and Alabama. Could pose a little bit of severe weather threats there as well. So tomorrow looks like this. We're talking about pretty much just a marginal threat of severe weather, southwest Oklahoma, back through the Texas Panhandle, western North Texas, all the way through the hill country are going to have that potential for maybe some isolated damaging winds, isolated large hail, and a very low tornado potential. There is a tornado threat, 2%, so there's obviously a chance, but it's low at this given time. Rainfall is what I mentioned before, is going to probably be the largest threat out of all of this. We'll probably see rainfall totals upwards of 2 to 3 inches in some areas, but I would at least say 1 inch is going to be reasonable for a lot of areas like North Texas. We could see some isolated amounts as high as half a foot, so we might see a lot of rain out of this. You might be wondering, are we going to have any big cold blasts or anything like that coming to the United States over the next 7 to 14 days? Well, luckily over the next 7 days, we're not looking at any significant cold blasts. Overall, we'll have a pretty much around or just slightly above average temperatures across the United States. The only exception will be to the southern plains over the next really 3 to 5 days as that trough moves off to the east and eventually impacts Texas going into tomorrow and Friday. Eventually heading into early next week, really just above average temperatures expected across a large area of the United States until a potential trough in Canada brings a little bit of cooler weather out of the north. That could potentially pose maybe a little bit of cooler weather, maybe some below freezing temperatures as well up to the northern plains. Beyond that though, long range, it's kind of hard to tell whether we'll have big cold blasts or not, but we'll be monitoring it very closely as we get closer. Now, the tropics have not been a discussion point at all ever since Hurricane Ian. However, we now have two areas of development that we're watching for very closely. One of them right now north of the Greater Antilles that is going to be moving off to the north, potentially towards Bermuda, and maybe going close to the east coast of the United States. Now, as of now, we're not expecting this to become a hurricane or anything like that, but it might become a tropical depression or a low-end tropical storm as it shifts its direction off to the north. We have another area of development now in the 5-day outlook. This is where it could develop back in the Caribbean Sea. This might become something more than just a tropical depression or storm. So we'll have to watch this area pretty closely. Now, there's really only one computer model that has any indication that we'll see this become a hurricane, and that's the GFS model, which, as you know, the GFS model has not been that accurate this year, but it is going to be something to watch for very closely, because if it does enter the Caribbean Sea and doesn't have too much of an impact with the shear levels, we very well may see this develop into a tropical storm and potentially even into a hurricane. Current forecasted track from the GFS model, obviously this is pretty far out, so take it with a grain of salt, but it would be potentially going towards the Yucatan Peninsula or somewhere over there in Central America. So be watching the system pretty closely. There are some other thoughts that it might go towards the Gulf of Mexico, but for right now, a lot of question marks on that. We'll keep you updated with the latest information on that. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting.